Welcome to the second part of this database tutorial on normalization. Previously, in the last video, we looked at the first three steps of normalization. So we looked at adding a primary key to a table. We looked at splitting our values into atomic values, using first name and last name as two separate fields, so making name atomic. And we looked at giving our fields definitions or field headings here. So we listed each field name. Just a word on atomic values, and one of the reasons why they're very good for databases. Previously, when we had name kind of all as one field, if we wanted to search for somebody with the last name of Jones, we would have had to have looked at every single entry and scan every single character in every single entry to see if there was the sequence Jones. Whereas now we can quickly look down our last name field and discard anything that doesn't start with a J, and then only look at the J's to find a Jones. So our database will already start to be our database is already starting to work more efficiently. So in this video we're going to look at the last rule of first normal form, and we're going to look at second normal form as well. So just as a reminder, the last rule of first normal form is there must be no repeating sets of data. And I'm going to edit that so it actually says sets. No repeating sets of data. In our database currently, we do have repeating sets. We've got drink and cost, drink 2 and cost 2, and drink 3 and cost 3. And you'll see there's all of these empty spaces in our database here, and that's really inefficient. And what if Bob Jones wanted like another drink? Would we add like a whole nother column here and a whole nother column here just to kind of satisfy his need for one more drink? It's quite inefficient. So what we're going to do is we're going to restructure this table slightly so that we don't have these repeating sets of data going across like this. So simply what we'll do is we'll say, okay, so Bob Jones, who is number 1, wants a long black, but he also wants an OJ, or an orange juice. So we're going to create another entry for Bob Jones at the bottom of our database. And we're going to give him this OJ. Cool. And he also wants a Coke. Bob Jones here also wants this Coke. So we're going to create another entry for Bob Jones in the database, and we are going to give him this Coke. Cool. Okay, now Sue McDonald, she's got all the drinks that she needs, but Bill London also wants a Coke. So we're going to create a new entry for Bill London, and we are going to give him his Coke. Right, now Bill London's got everything he wants. Mike Hoppy also wants a water. So let's give Mike Hoppy his water. And finally, Ellie Fitzgerald has a water, but she also wants a Fanta. So let's give her that Fanta. So now, instead of having all this, these repeating sets of data here, we've simply listed all of the drinks in one column and all of the costs in one column, and then we've got separate entries for each of these different orders, if you will. Let me just delete that content there and make it plain so it's not distracting. And let's get rid of all of the distracting black lines there, and there we go. So that's starting to look a lot more tidy. So this is now in first normal form, but we now need to think about how to make this even more efficient by placing it into second normal form. And the way that we do that is by following this rule. And this rule is that non-key elements, which basically mean data that's not the key, must be wholly dependent on the primary key. And I guess the best way to explain it is using the example. So let's jump back to the database and look at the example. Here, we've got a customer ID. So this is the primary key. And everything along here, all of the stuff, these are all non-key elements because they're not the key. This is the key, the primary key, and this is a non-key element. So if this is customer ID, this primary key is describing or is associated with the customer. So does Bob directly relate to the customer ID 1? Well, yes, because Bob Jones is this customer. So we can say that Bob and Jones both directly relate to a customer ID of 1. This customer ID describes Bob Jones. Does $2 relate to a customer ID or relate to a customer? No, it doesn't. $2 is just some money that is associated with a drink. It doesn't actually describe anything about Bob Jones. And similarly, a long black, a type of coffee, is anything about long black really associated with Bob Jones? Well, apart from the fact that he probably likes them, no. Customer ID 1 doesn't describe a long black. So essentially, anything that relates to the customer, their first name, their last name, maybe their date of birth if that was included there, or their phone number, that would all be associated with customer ID 1, so it would be dependent on customer ID 1. However, stuff that describes a drink isn't at all dependent on customer ID 1, so we must break this stuff off and put it into a separate table. Now this is going to be a little bit trickier. Well, actually this is not going to be too tricky, but what I might do is rearrange this data, but I might copy it first so I've got a record of who wants which drinks. So let me just copy this. I'm going to scroll down a little and paste it again. And now I'm going to start to split this up into a couple of different tables. My first table is going to be about customers, and my second table is going to be about drinks. So let us take away this drinks table, and I'll put it down here. So now we've got a customer table. Great, except now we've got repeating sets of data this way. We've got 3 entries for Bob Jones, but Bob Jones is just one customer, so we don't need these extra entries. So I'm going to delete these records. Bill London is already there, so we can delete Bill London here. My copy is already here, so I can delete my copy here. And Ellie Fitzgerald is already customer ID 5, so I can delete customer ID 10. And I'm just going to clear up these cells and make them no fill. Cool. So let's go back down to our drinks. I'm going to cut this again to move it up so it's a little bit easier to see. And I'm going to place it here. Now, since we've broken this database in 2, we've actually broken one of the rules of first normal form. And that rule is each table must have a primary key. Because we've added another table now, we also need to give this table a new primary key. So let's just add in a primary key. And let's call this primary key, because remember each field needs to be defined, drink ID. Now, looking through this table, I can see that there's 2 entries for water, so I'm going to delete one of those entries for water. There's only 1 entry for Fanta, so that's good. There's 2 entries for Coke, so I'm going to delete one of those entries for Coke. And while I'm here, I'm going to look at Coke and notice that it's got a lowercase c, whereas most other things start with an uppercase. So I'm going to change that to a capital letter. I'm going to see that there are 2 entries for OJ, or orange juice. I'm going to delete one of those. And then I'm going to see that there are 2 entries for a long black, except one of them is for $2 and one of them is for $3, and they're both spelt differently. So I would use my powers of deduction to say that someone's made an error when they've entered this data in. I'm going to assume that actually it's called a long black, not a long bulk, and I'm going to use this as my entry. And then I'm going to look at the two different costs, and I'm going to try and decide which of these is more accurate. So perhaps, seeing as it's a coffee and a flat white is a coffee and a flat white costs $4, I'm going to think to myself, a long black's probably $3. So I'll change this to $3, and then I'll delete this entry from the database. Finally, I'm going to format this cell to read $4, so that it's consistent with the rest of the database. Let's try that one more time. There we go. And I'm going to delete these gaps in my database now. And I'm going to renumber my primary keys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 different drinks and 5 different people. Now, what we have here is everything, all the data that's in our database previously is listed here, but somehow our customers and our drinks aren't connected together, which is not good. So that's the next step that we're going to have to do, is connect these two databases together. And I'm going to leave that till the next video to do, because this one's getting a little bit long. So please stay tuned for part 3 of this tutorial in normalizing a database.